Sehr verehrter Herr Präsident.
President, President in Office of the Council, ladies and gentlemen, dear members. For me, it's a very pleasant duty, not just actually a duty, but a real pleasure as President of the Commission for the very first time in my short life to give a State of the Union address in this chamber. As Luxembourg Prime Minister, frequently, I think to be precise, it was 20 times that I gave a State of the Nation speech. But anyway, mostly I got applauded after the speech. People disagreed as to the substance, but everybody seemed to agree that it was too long. So today, I run that self-same danger. I've not actually drafted or been able to draft this speech under the normal conditions, and you probably guess why, or probably some of you know why. But I will try and conclude in good style. The speech takes place in the framework agreement between the European Parliament and the European Commission, which has been concluded between us. And in that framework, the President of the Commission, that's the first half of September in fact, comes to the Parliament and does a Q&A session on the prior year and work to be tabled to the House to cover what the Commission is doing over the next few months, say a year. So it's really the priorities of the Commission which are involved and of the European Union. And to that end, both with respect to Martin Schulz and the Prime Minister of Luxembourg as President in office, have received those priorities in writing. I've made the letter available, and appended to the letter is a document about how we're going to deal with the 10 working priorities of the Commission. A statement of intent. I'm not going to deal with all those topics today. I'm not doing that to be impolite to you, but it is in writing. And Frans Timmermans also has put things in writing. The Parliament has received that corpus in writing. But what I'm trying to do today is not to go into all the details, but try and make the general picture more understandable. If you like, I'm the first President of the Commission who is, in a way, directly endorsed, including by the vote of the European Parliament. That was my direct path to office, right from the very beginning. In fact, when I was speaking to you on the 14th of June, laying out my stall to you, I made it quite clear that I intend to make the Commission more political, and therefore the President of the Commission, because of the democratic procedures and the nomination procedures, would also be a political president. When I say political, basically I mean political in the very best connotations of that word. We are politicians, if you like, political people rather than just politicians. These days, in French anyway, it's got a bad connotation. So in the best connotations, we are, as you'd say in English, politicians. And by political, I don't mean we're going to politicize everything, but that's not our wish. I just want to say that I really do feel that now is not the time to go ahead willy-nilly, business as usual. Please don't feel that's the case.
Ich würde Sie sehr herzlich bitten, nicht.
Don't count up how many times I use the word social. Just take it that my heart is full of the social. And don't count how many times I use economic, monetary, or budget, those words. Very often people make rather empty speeches about this. Now we've got to be frank. Really, the bell tolls. The time has come. We have to look overtly at the huge issues with which the European Union is now confronted. And that's what I want to focus on now. Our European Union. I don't really want to fall into despond, but it's not in a good situation. There's no point of the President of the Commission, the representatives of European democracy and the peoples of Europe to just put things in rosy colours. No, we're not in a good place. There's a lack of Europe in the European Union, and there's a lack of union in this European Union.
Das müssen wir ändern.
And that has to change. We have to change it, and now. Work together to that end. I think that is the remit we've got from the European electorate. And that actually corresponds to the remit you gave to me.
I don't know why you are becoming nervous when you are speaking about the European Union. So, well, you can interrupt me from time to time. I will not at each time respond to what you are saying, because what you are saying is worthless. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, whatever work programs or legislative agendas say, the first priority today is and must be addressing the refugee crisis. Since the beginning of the year, nearly 500,000 people have made their way to Europe. The vast majority of them are fleeing from Syria, the terror of the Islamic State in Libya, or dictatorship in Eritrea. The most affected member states are Greece, with over 200,000 refugees, Hungary, with more or less 150,000, and Italy, with 120,000. The numbers are impressive. For some, they are frightening. But now is not a time to take fright. It is a time for bold, determined, concerted action by the European Union, by its member states, and by its institutions. The first of all the matters, before other considerations, is a matter of humanity and human dignity. And for Europe, it's also a matter for historical fairness. We Europeans, we are all Europeans here. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, I'm noting that you do think that you are not Europeans. Okay, well said, but not well done. This is not a time to take fright. It's a time of humanity and of human dignity. we Europeans, all of us, I thought before the interruption, all of us, we should remember well that Europe is a continent where nearly everyone has at one time been a refugee. Our common history is marked by millions of Europeans fleeing from religious or political persecution, from war, from dictatorship, from oppression. Huguenots fleeing from France in the 17th century. Jews, Sinti, Roma, many others fleeing from Germany during the Nazi era of the 30s and the 40s of the last century. Spanish Republicans fleeing to refugees camps in southern France at the end of the 1930s after their defeat in the Civil War. Hungarian revolutionaries fleeing to Austria and elsewhere, everywhere in Europe, after their uprising against communist rules was oppressed by Soviet tanks in 1956. Czech, Slovak citizens seeking exile in other countries, including mine, after the oppression of the Prague Spring in 1968. Hundreds of thousands were forced to flee from their homes after and during the Yugoslav wars. That was by the end of the last century, not centuries ago, by the end of the last century, in the last decade of the 20th century. Have we forgotten that there is a reason there are more McDonald's living in the United States than the entire population of Scotland? That there is a reason the number of O'Neills and Murphys in the US exceeds by far those living in Ireland? Have we forgotten that 20 million people of Polish ancestry live outside Poland as a result of political and economic emigration after the many border shifts, forced expulsions and resettlements during Poland's so often painful history? Have we really forgotten that after the devastation of the Second World War, 60 million people were refugees in Europe? That as a result of this terrible European experience, a global protection regime, the 1951 Geneva Convention on the Status of Refugees, was established to grant refuge to those who jumped the walls in Europe to escape from war and totalitarian oppression. We Europeans should know and should never forget why giving refuge and complying with the fundamental right to asylum is so important. The fundamental right to asylum is one of the most important international and European values. We should not forget that. I've said in this House and elsewhere in the past that we are too seldom proud of our European heritage and our European project. Yes, in spite of our fragility, of our weaknesses, our self-perceived weaknesses, today it is Europe that is sought worldwide as a place of refuge and exile. It is Europe today that represents a place of hope, a haven of stability in the eyes of women and men in the Middle East and in Africa. This is something, I have to say this here, this is something to be proud of and not something to fear. Europe today, ladies and gentlemen, in spite of many differences amongst the member states is by far the wealthiest place and the most stable continent in the world. Those who are criticizing Europe, the European integration, the European construction, the European Union, have to admit that this is the place of peace and that this is the place of stability, and we should be proud of this. We have the means to help those fleeing from war, terror, oppression. I know that many now will want to say that this is all very well, but Europe cannot take everybody. It is true that Europe cannot house all the misery of the world, but let us be honest and put things into perspective. There is certainly an important, an unprecedented number of refugees coming to Europe at the moment. However, they still represent just 0.11% of the total European Union population. In Lebanon, by comparison, refugees represent 25% of the population in a country which has only 1/5 of the wealth we do enjoy in the European Union. Who are we that we are never making this kind of comparisons? Who are we? Let us be clear and honest with our often worried citizens. As long as there is war in Syria and terror in Libya, the refugee crisis will not simply go away. We can build walls, we can build fences, but imagine, without being demagogic, imagine for a second if it were you, your child in your arms, the world you knew torn apart around you. There is no price you would not pay. There is no wall you would not climb. No sea you would not go to seal. No border you would not cross if it is a war of the barbarism and the so-called Islamic State that you are fleeing. We are fighting against the Islamic State. Why are we not ready to accept those who are fleeing the Islamic State? We have to accept these people on the European territory. It is high time to act, to manage the refugee crisis, because there is no alternative to this. There has been a lot of finger pointing, not enough finger pointing, but too much finger pointing in the past weeks. Member states have accused each other of not doing enough or doing the wrong thing. And more often than no fingers have been pointed from national capitals towards Brussels. Brussels is always accused if member states are failing. If member states are not doing their job, Brussels, the Commission, the European Parliament is accused of not doing the job. We could all be, not all, the majority of this House and myself and my Commission, we could be angry about this blame game. But I wonder who that would serve. Being angry does not help anyone. Blaming others does not help the refugees and the migrants. And the attempt of blaming others is often just a sign that politicians, policy makers, sometimes lawmakers, are overwhelmed by unexpected events. Instead, we should rather recall what has been agreed that can help in the current situation. It is time to look at what is on the table and move swiftly forwards. We are not starting anew. Since the early years of this century, the Commission, not mine, the one of José Manuel Barroso, has persistently tabled legislation after legislation to build a common European asylum system. And the Parliament and the Council have enacted this legislation, piece by piece. And the last piece of legislation entered into force just in July 2015, 2 months ago. Across Europe, we now have common standards for the way we receive asylum seekers in respect of their dignity, for the way we process their asylum applications, and we have common criteria which our independent justice systems use to determine whether someone is entitled to international protection. But these standards, honourable members of Parliament, these standards need to be implemented entirely and respected everywhere in Europe in practice. And this is clearly not the case. Before the summer, not after the summer, before the summer, the Commission started the first series of 32 infringement proceedings to remind Member States of what they had previously agreed to do. That's a matter of credibility. We are legislating, and we are not implementing. It's a matter of credibility that Member States are implementing and respecting commonly agreed international and European laws. A second series of infringement proceedings will follow in the days to come. Common asylum standards are important, but they are not enough to cope with the current refugee crisis. The Commission, the Parliament, the Council said in the spring that we need a comprehensive European agenda on migration. We proposed this as a Commission in May, and it would be unfair to say that nothing has happened since then. We have tripled our presence at sea. 122,000 lives have been saved since then. Every life lost is one too many. It's one too many. But many more have been rescued that would have been lost otherwise, an increase of 250%. We should be proud of that performance. "29 Member States and Schengen-associated countries are participating in the joint operations coordinated by Frontex in Italy, Greece and Hungary. 102 guest officers from 20 countries, 31 ships, 3 helicopters, 4 fixed-wing aircraft, 8 patrol cars, 6 thermal version vehicles and 4 transport vehicles. This is a first measure of European solidarity in action, even though more will have to be done. We have redoubled our efforts to tackle smugglers and to dismantle human traffickers group. Cheap ships are now harder to come by, leading to less people putting their lives in peril in unseaworthy boats. As a result, the central Mediterranean route has stabilized at around 115,000 arriving during the month of August, the same as last year. We now need to achieve a similar stabilization of the Balkan routes, which has clearly been neglected by all policymakers. The European Union is also the #1 donor in the global efforts to alleviate the Syrian refugee crisis. Around €4 billion have been mobilized by the European Commission, that means by you, too, and Member States in humanitarian, development, economic and stabilization assistance to Syrians in their country and to refugees and their host communities in neighboring Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Turkey, and Egypt. Indeed, just today, we launched 2 new projects to provide schooling and food security to 240,000 Syrian refugees in Turkey. And by the way, I would like to applaud the efforts of Jordan, of Turkey, and of Egypt, and of Lebanon. These countries, by far poorer we are, they are making efforts we should applaud to and we should recognize, and in moral and in financial terms. We have collectively committed to resettling over 22,000 people from outside of Europe over the next year, showing solidarity with our neighbors. Of course, this remains very modest, too modest by comparison to the Herculean efforts undertaken by Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, who are hosting over 4 million Syrian refugees. But I'm encouraged that some member states are showing now their willingness to significantly step up our European resettlement efforts. This will allow us very soon to come forward with a structured system to pool European resettlement efforts more systematically. It has to be done, and it will be done. Where Europe has clearly under-delivered is on common solidarity with regard to the refugees who have arrived on our territory. To me, it is clear that the member states where most refugees first arrived, and at the moment these are Italy, Greece and Hungary, cannot be left alone to cope with this enormous challenge. This is why the Commission already proposed an emergency mechanism in May, not now, back in May, to relocate initially 40,000 people seeking international protection from Italy and Greece. And this is why today we are proposing a second emergency mechanism to relocate a further 120,000 people from Italy, Greece and Hungary. This has to be done in a compulsory way. I call on Member States to adopt the Commission proposals on the emergency relocation of altogether 160,000 refugees at the Council of Interior Ministers on the 14th of September. We are not talking about 40,000, we are not talking about 120,000, it's 160,000. That's the number Europeans have to take in charge and have to take in their arms. And I really hope that this time everyone will be on board. No poems, no rhetorics. Action is what is needed for the time being. What is happening to human beings? We are talking about European beings. We are not talking about numbers. Human beings coming from Syria and Libya today could easily be the case in Ukraine tomorrow. Are we making selections? Are we distinguishing between Christians, Jews, Muslims? This continent has made the best experience to distinguish on the basis of religious criteria. There is no religion, there is no belief, there is no philosophy when it comes to refugees and to those who are fleeing. ladies and gentlemen, winter is approaching. Do we really want to have families sleeping in railway stations, in Budapest and elsewhere, in tents, cold tents during night, on shores, in Kos? We are in charge of the winter period for those who had to flee their countries for the reasons I have mentioned. Of course, relocation alone will not solve the issue. It is true that we also need to separate better those who are in clear need of international protection and are therefore very likely to apply for asylum successfully, and those who are leaving their country for other reasons which do not fall under the right of asylum. This is why today the Commission is proposing a common EU list of safe countries of origin. This list will enable Member States to fast-track asylum procedures for nationals of countries that are presumed to live safe in. The presumption of safety must, in our view, certainly apply to all countries which the European Council unanimously decided meet the basic Copenhagen criteria for EU membership, notably as regards democracy, the rule of law and fundamental rights. It should also apply to other potential candidate countries on the Western Balkans in view of their progress made towards candidate status. I'm of course aware that the list of safe countries is only a procedural simplification. It cannot take away, and I would act strongly against that, the fundamental right of asylum for asylum seekers coming from Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Serbia and Turkey. But it allows the national authorities to focus on those refugees which are much more likely to be granted asylum, notably those from Syria. And this focus is very much needed in the current situation. A list of safe countries is not taking away asylum rights from those people coming from the countries being listed. That's important. It's important. We are not neutralizing the Geneva Convention. Asylum is a right. And the countries being on the list of safe countries have to know that if they are taken off of this list because fundamental rights would not be ensured in these countries, they are losing their chance to join the European Union. These two things are going together. Safe list, yes, but it is time we prepare a more fundamental change in the way we deal with asylum applications, and notably the Dublin system that requires that asylum applications be dealt with by the first country of entry. We need more Europe in our asylum policy. We need more union in our refugee policy. A true European refugee and asylum policy requires solidarity to be permanently anchored in our policy approach and our rules. This is why today the Commission is also proposing a permanent relocation mechanism, which will allow us to deal with crisis situations more swiftly in the future. More swiftly in the future, that means more swiftly than in the past. A common refugee and asylum policy requires further approximation of asylum policies after refugee status is granted. Member States need to take a second look at their support, integration and inclusion policies. The Commission is ready to look into how EU funds can support these efforts. And I'm strongly in favour of allowing asylum seekers to work and to earn their own money whilst their applications are being processed. Labour, work, being in a job is a matter of dignity. Those who are working are finding back the dignity they had before they were leaving. And so we should do everything to change our national legislation in order to allow refugees, migrants, to work since day one of their arrival in Europe. A united refugee and asylum policy also requires stronger joint efforts to secure our external borders. Fortunately, in the European Union, we have given up border controls between member states of the Schengen area to guarantee free movement of people, a unique symbol of European integration. And this Schengen system will not be abolished under the mandate of this Commission. But the other side of the coin to free movement is that we must work together more closely to manage the external borders. This is what our citizens do expect. The Commission said it back in May, and I said it during the election campaign together with Martin, together with Guy, together with No. I'm not pointing at Mrs. Keller, but I was just thinking on Mr. Tsipras. And I'm not confusing the two. We need to strengthen Sky. Significant. Bitte? José Bové est là. Oui, je l'ai vu tout à l'heure. Sorry, José. We need to strengthen Frontex significantly and develop it into a fully operational European border and coast guard system. That is certainly feasible, but it will cost money. The Commission believes this is money well invested. This is why we will propose ambitious steps forwards to a European border and coast guard before the end of this year. A truly united European migration policy also means that we need to look into opening legal channels for migration. But let us be clear, this will not help in addressing the refugee crisis we are currently in. But if there are more safe, controlled roads open to Europe, we can manage migration better and make the illegal work of human traffickers less attractive. Let us not forget we are an aging continent in demographic decline. We will be needing talents coming from everywhere in the world. Over time, migration must change from a problem to be tackled to a well-managed resource. To this end, the Commission will come forward with a well-designed legal migration package in early 2016. This is highly important. Migration has to be legalized. It's not sufficient to protest against illegal immigration. We have to organize legal ways to Europe. A lasting solution will only come if we address the root causes, the reasons why we are facing this important refugee crisis. Our European policy must be more assertive. Foreign policy must be more assertive. We can no longer afford to be ignorant, disunited with regard to war or instability right in our neighborhood. We have to find a solution. Maybe that we are too weak for achieving this, to the Libyan problem. We have to address in a more solution-oriented way the Syrian crisis. I call European diplomatic offensive European diplomatic offensive to address the crisis in Syria and in Libya. We need a stronger Europe when it comes to foreign policy. I'm very glad that Federica Mogherini, our highly determined High Representative, she's high because she's highly determined, has prepared the ground for such an initiative with diplomatic success in Iran. She has prepared the ground for such an initiative with a diplomatic success in the Iran nuclear talks, and I would like to congratulate Federica for that extraordinary performance. In order to facilitate the work of our High Representative, Federica, the Commission today is proposing to establish an emergency trust fund, starting with 1.8 billion euros from our common EU financial means to address the crisis in the Sahel and Lake Chad regions, the Horn of Africa and the North of Africa. We want to help create lasting stability, for instance, by creating employment opportunities of local communities and thereby address the root causes of destabilization, forced displacement and illegal migration. I expect all EU member states to pitch in and match our ambitions. We need this emergency trust fund in order to prevent future crises. And we need higher development aid budgets. I don't like the expression development aid, cooperation budgets. It's abnormal that member states of the European Union are reducing their budgetary efforts when it comes to aid development. They have to be increased. I do not want, Mr. President, to create any illusions that the refugee crisis will be over any time soon. It will not, and we have to know that. But pushing back boats from piers, setting fire to refugee camps, or turning a blind eye to poor and helpless people, that is not Europe. Europe, that's the baker in Kos who gives away his bread to hungry and weary souls. Europe is the students in Munich and in Passau who bring clothes for the new arrivals at the train station. Europe, that's those standing at the Munich rail station applauding and welcoming refugees. The Europe I want to live in is illustrated by those who are helping. The Europe I don't want to live in is a Europe refusing those who are in need. The crisis is dark, and the journey, of course, is still long. I'm counting on you in this House, the House of European democracy, and on all member states to show European courage going forward in line with our common values and history. Monsieur le Président,
President, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, as many of you are, I realise that I have already exceeded the speaking time which would normally be allocated to me for my State of the Union address, and as has formerly been the case for a President in office of the Commission. But I do need to take some time, given the situation, to talk about a number of other issues. First of all, Greece, which is very close to my heart. We've had very serious debates about the Greek crisis. It's a debate which affects us all very profoundly. It's been a difficult debate, and I endeavoured at great length to explain to the President of Greece that we were democratic countries dealing on a democratic basis. And here you are members of Parliament, and parliamentarians subscribe to the principle of parliamentary democracy, which is paramount in the 18 other countries which form the Eurozone. So I had serious discussions about this with the former Prime Minister. The Commission has been the victim of attacks from certain member states who've felt that they were not necessarily able to accept the proposals aimed at finding a solution to the Greek crisis. I said then, and I would reiterate here today, as I said before, that the Commission has a weighty duty, and one of them is to be the custodian of the general interest. So the Commission had to deal with the Greek issue, because failing to do this would have been a great weakness on our part, and it would have been a failure on the part of the Commission and dereliction of its duty. Therefore, we did what we felt was right and we felt was our duty. And in that context, obviously, we have been subject to criticism from various quarters. But I felt that it was important that I was engaged in this debate, despite the excellent work done by the staff and civil servants in Brussels right throughout the holidays and the parliamentary recess. I did not feel that it was correct, right or proper to leave it up to the civil servants to resolve the Greek crisis. We ourselves are deeply involved in it. Vice President Dombrovskis, Franz Timmermans, Pierre Moscovici, myself, and the other commissioners in the college have been deeply involved in working to try to find a solution to a very pressing problem. The Commission and its President felt that it was not an option to fail to find a solution to the Greek crisis. It was absolutely essential for us to recognise and to say that Grexit was not an option. If we hadn't said that loudly and clearly, Grexit could have happened.
Et j'ai dit à Monsieur Tsipras.
And I said to Mr. Tsipras and other members of the Greek authorities at the time that it was important that they understood that this didn't mean that they would be saved at any cost. I was not a magician, as I said to Alexis Tsipras. I didn't have a magic wand. I couldn't pull a rabbit out of a hat, and so forth. I had to make it clear to him, and I think that he understood that Grexit was a possibility, but it was not an option which we were going to mention publicly. But it was not something that was absolutely excluded as a last resort. So we felt that we did what we had to do. And I have always believed that this is our responsibility. The Greek issue is not just a question of consolidating public finances and structural funds. All that is extremely important, yes, but it was a much more weighty problem than that, impacting on the whole issue of economic growth in the country, its position in the European Union, and so forth. And I think that the European Union is delighted to have Greece as a member. And I have been profoundly perturbed by comments in recent months that Greece should leave the euro or should leave the European Union and that it wasn't a serious-minded partner in Europe. I think that the Greeks who are least well off are hard-working people who are doing their absolute utmost to try to ensure that their country does make progress. And I think we need to show respect to the Greeks, and there has been a failure to do that in some quarters in recent times.
Je voudrais que le programme sur lequel nous...
We have agreed on a programme, as you know, and I would like this programme to be respected by all Greek governments, by the Greek government that negotiated it, by future Greek governments, and all future Greek governments. There are a number of rules which have been agreed, and in the past some of these agreements have been flouted in the European Union and the Eurozone. But I think this time we all need to realise that we are serious and for real, and we require respect of the arrangements and agreements that have been reached. 35 billion has been allocated to this fund to generate economic and social growth in the Republic of Greece, and I would like this offer, which is not simply a gift in the spirit of generosity, but is an offer made in the European spirit. I would like it to be respected and accepted for what it is in Greece, and to think that we can make progress. The crisis is, of course, not finished. For all we feel that we have managed to make progress in the Greek crisis and bring it towards a resolution. There are over 17 million people in the Eurozone who are unemployed, and levels of unemployment are absolutely unacceptable in Europe, and the economic recession will only be over once we have full employment in Europe. Sometimes I pause to reflect on why it should be that a country which is as rich as Europe is should be so far away from respecting the fundamental rules which should be respected by all, men and women, old and young. Every individual has the right and entitlement to a job, and this is something which is of paramount importance in Europe. The AAA status is absolutely essential, and we need to return to a situation of full employment. This is far from impossible.
Cela présupposera que nous...
Of course, this will presuppose that we continue to consolidate our budgets and to work on structural reform and to invest. These are three strands of our vital policy, and the Council has before it an investment plan, 315 billion investment plan, which we hope will be launched in detail in the foreseeable future. I think that all those who are in positions of power and responsibility in companies, unions and politics in the European Union should be working in favour of growth in Europe. This should be their mantra. The Juncker plan, of course, paradoxically, has been baptized the Juncker plan, but it is in fact a plan for investment, and I certainly am committed to making it a success in its own right, not just because of its association with my name personally. And I'd like to think that everybody who is involved with it will do their absolutely utmost, because it's vital for growth and employment.
Mais tout cela, mesdames et messieurs les députés.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, this is all very important, but on its own, it is not enough. We need to have a clearer strategic vision of where we are going in the future, and this is why we have the 5 Presidents programme on deepening the European Union. I said 5 presidents because, not just in the interest of my autobiography, but as a matter of principle, I wanted the President of Parliament to be involved in this work. So we have produced this 5 Presidents report, which involves the European Parliament. And this is a report which looks forward to the future of European monetary union, which of course will involve the European Parliament intimately. And this is why I wanted your President to be involved right from the outset in the work that was being done. He presented a collective and a personal viewpoint on our proposals. We weren't all happy all the time with what was said, but we felt it was absolutely essential that we had an interinstitutional discussion and approach on all of this. And therefore, I can assure you that your views have been expressed and factored into this report. And I feel that it is essential in looking towards the future of economic and monetary union that the Parliament has a much stronger role to play than it has had hitherto. It should be involved in economic governance in the European Union. And I have been saying since 1991, when I was Minister of Finance in Luxembourg and working closely at that time with Nicolas Schmidt, when I was chairing the Intergovernmental Conference on Economic and Monetary Union, there were a number of people who were in favour of economic governance, and one of them was Jacques Delors, Pierre Bérégovoy, also, who's sadly no longer with us, Philippe Mustat, who will constantly remind us of what we agreed then, and I myself, well, I am still here and I'm still with you. Apparently eternal in my positions in Europe. In any event, here at that point we wanted to come up with a treaty which enshrined the rules which should govern the Eurozone. And there are many, I think, nowadays who don't understand that economic governance or wirtschaftliche Steuerung is something to which we subscribed a long time ago.
25 years ago. Nous allons vous proposer.
So, against this backdrop, we hope to work towards a deeper economic and monetary union, a system of deposit guarantees, and various other initiatives. I think it's essential that we have a common deposit guarantee scheme, and our intention is to do this in the form of a reinsurance scheme. It won't be a mutualisation of debt, but it will be a reinsurance scheme, and we feel that it should give greater certainty to investors and lenders in Europe, and therefore we are very much in favour of this. We're also in favour of introducing a European Treasury. Obviously, this is something which will need to be discussed in greater detail, and it may sound like a slogan. Obviously, there will be a lot of work to be done on the content of it, but I think it's important that the European Union should have a treasury which can work with the stability mechanism and can dovetail with the work being done by that institution in order to guarantee greater sustainability and stability. As to fiscal policy, there is a lack of union in Europe. The Commission has taken note of this and therefore has decided that exchange of information on fiscal matters and tax arrangements should be implemented by the Council. We are therefore going to produce draft legislation to that effect. When I was 17 or 18, I remember very clearly understanding that tax was imposed on revenues where they were generated, and we feel that this is a principle which is paramount in economics and should be respected in the European Union.
Tout comme nous devons agir en faveur.
We also feel that it's absolutely essential that we work on the basis of this simple rule, which has all too often been flouted in the past. And therefore we feel that throughout Europe it is absolutely essential that we have respect for the rules that are in place. And we feel that we should have fair remuneration in Europe the same work for the same job wherever it is in the European Union. That is only right and proper. As far as social policy is concerned, Marianne Thyssen is proposing a range of social policy measures which will be put forward in 2016, because the European Union is much more than Greece, money and finance, Ukraine. The European Union is a common set of values, inter alia social policy values, on which our union is founded and to which we subscribe wholeheartedly.
Yeah, Mr. President, now I have a serious problem, because you would like me to interrupt, I know, but I'm in the middle of my speech. J'ajouterai donc rapidement.
So I shall simply add that the European Parliament will need to remain the Parliament of the European Union beyond the confines of this debate.
Oui. Je suis en train de faire une sélection, mesdames et messieurs.
Yes, I am selecting the salient points from the remainder of my speech. I think it's essential that we have international representation of the Eurozone, and we need to improve on that. It is abnormal that the Bretton Woods institutions and the International Monetary Fund are bodies where we don't have proper European representation, but all countries are represented their own views as they see fit. So the president of the Eurozone should be representing the Eurozone in these bodies. And we do need to have single representation in the both in the Bretton Woods institutions and the IMF as a matter of priority. I think that the country-specific recommendations which are issued by the Commission should be complied with by the Member States. We've reduced the numbers to some 3 per country in recent times. We submit them to the Council, and the Council then takes note of the reforms which are necessary, and it is essential that the 3 reforms per country are implemented and enforced, because it is essential that this happens. It's important that the Member States take responsibility at national level for the recommendations put forward by the Commission and endorsed by the Council.
The United Kingdom. Because when campaigning, I was advocating a fair deal with Britain, and I'm totally convinced that we will have a fair deal with Britain. I've established in the structures of the Commission a specific special group for the negotiations with Britain, under the leadership, by the way, of a British citizen who is a European. That's not a contradiction. That's not a... Yeah. I was hesitating between Jonathan Fall and Nigel Farage, and then I made a choice. I took Jonathan Fall, and Nigel, of course, will be his greatest supporter, because the one is British and the other is British and European, so you have to come together, and you will, of course. Of course, the United Kingdom and the British government and the British policymakers are right when they criticize the European Union for being too bureaucratic, for this overdoses of regulation. It is the program of my Commission to bring down this regulation, and under the leadership of the first Vice President, Frans Timmermans, we are doing everything we can do in order to make sure that the regulation in the European Union will be a better one. But better regulation does not mean destruction, does not mean no rules, does not mean that the European Union should stand away from everything which has to be organized in a proper way in Europe. We have launched the digital single market. We have launched the energy Union. We are step by step, progressively completing the internal market, because the internal market is not complete. We are taking initiatives after initiatives in order to promote entrepreneurship in Europe. These are all requests of the British government and more largely than that of the British policymakers. The problem is that this cannot be requested from this Commission, because this Commission is doing exactly that. And I would like our British friends to support the initiatives of the Commission in that very field. The same is applying to the need we do see to conclude as many trade agreements with leading nations in the world, including the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. I'm in favor of the TTP treaty. But I'm not in favor of giving up European standards, European principles. As in the case of Britain, the freedom of movement of workers cannot be touched. The same applies to the Transatlantic Partnership Agreement. We have our basic values, we have our principles, and these principles cannot be given up during these negotiations with the United States. And I'm strongly in favor, as is Cecilia Malmström, the excellent trade commissioner we have. I'm in favor of a maximum of transparency, but I'm against developing publicly negotiation positions of the European Union. We are weak, and we are weak the more we are telling those we are negotiating with what we do intend to do if our positions will not be accepted, the weaker we are. We are in international negotiations. I'm in favor of transparency, but I'm also in favor of seriosity. And negotiations have to be conducted in a serious way. I should have one word, one para, one speech on Ukraine. We are supporting the democratic efforts of the now president of Ukraine. We have to support this man because he has the courage of action. And in this country, this is not an easy thing to be done. And those who are doubting about our involvement, our engagement in the Ukraine case will be proven wrong, because we have offered in so many talks to President Poroshenko all the needs Ukraine was asking for, and we will continue in that way. We were lending 3.41 billion euros in 3 macro financial assistance programs to Ukraine. We were helping to broker a deal that will secure Ukraine's winter gas supplies, and we are advising our friends there on the reform of the judiciary. I will do everything to enable the European Council to give visa-free right to travel to Ukrainian citizens. If the conditions are fulfilled, it has to be done. As Guy Verhofstadt was saying months ago in this House, the Maidan rallies were not only about democracy, about membership of the European Union. People there and people living in Ukraine now, they don't want to have a country where corruption is playing the role the corruption is playing in Ukraine. The Ukrainian Democrats want a corruption-free country, and so we have to attend them in that very field. I would like to say, because I'm very attentive and I have these things on my radar all the time, to our eastern member states, notably the Balkans. that the security and the borders of EU member states are untouchable. And I want this to be understood very clearly in Moscow. The member states of the Balkans and of other countries have to know that solidarity is not an empty word. We are there now, and we will be there if ever this is needed. The Balkans, Poland and others, mainly Poland and the Balkans, the Baltics, pardon. Yeah. I don't confuse the two, by the way. The Baltics and Poland are very important members of the European Union, and they should not think that we would not be there if anyway their security and their borders would be in danger. We have as an obligation to protect, if needed, the security of everyone. I don't know if you were mentioning the Luxembourgish army when you are saying army. The Luxembourgish army is an excellent army. 771 soldiers, defense minister included. The Luxembourgish army will not be of great help, but others can be if needed. Yeah. I'm wondering myself why I like your interruptions. But I like them, because these are inspiring, because they are remembering me and reminding me what I should have told you before. Yeah. So I will never forget the meeting I had before being appointed with Nigel Farage and his group. It was very sportive, open and frank, and not without humour. That's, by the way, the only quality we are sharing, humour. That's something, yes. Could I have the permission of the President of the Parliament to distribute the text on climate change? Because that's important, but I'm running out of time. I'm speaking 72 minutes and 15 seconds, so really, I don't want to more. Yeah, okay, yeah. I have new friends. Yeah. Those sitting in the middle of Parliament, they are saying, well, we are starting to become tired. But those sitting there, they want me to continue. Yeah. Okay. So you have
President of Commission. Would you mind waiting 1 moment, sir? The member sitting in seat 358 has got a mask on his face of Mrs. Merkel's face. You may not like her, but you have certainly made her look very pretty. I think it's Mr. Bonanno. Now, you've had your fun, Mr. Bonanno. Would you please sit down again?
Okay, Kommissionsvorsitzender.
Okay.
Please do continue, President of the Commission.
Okay, yeah. Okay, bye-bye.
Auch das wird von europäischen Steuerzahlern finanziert.
This is being financed also by the European taxpayer. Mr. Juncker, do continue.
The European Parliament, Mr. President, is the place where you can meet everyone. Union in diversity. I would like, Mr. President, to say a few words, given the time constraints we have, on the climate change. The text of my speech will be distributed to a larger public in the next coming hours. I simply wanted to say that I do think that we have to be very ambitious as European Union on our way to Paris. I do think that we are doing major efforts, probably not enough, but more efforts, user efforts than others are delivering. We are tackling the root causes of the next migration wave in the next coming decades if we are addressing in a proper way the climate change problems, because tomorrow morning we'll have climate refugees, and we have to know that. We should not be surprised, astonished if the first climate refugees are coming to Europe. We have to act now because we don't have time to lose, and that's why I want the European Union and the Member States to be as ambitious as possible on our way to Paris. But I would like to say here that I do think that the European Union should not sign just any deal. Europe's priority has to be to adopt an ambitious, robust and binding global climate deal. That's a European duty, and we have to fight for that and to have to raise the voice against those who in our member states are not sharing that view. Europe is not neutral when it comes to climate change. Europe has to be an example, a model for others. Voilà, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames, Messieurs.
Well, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't a state of the entire Union, but I didn't wish to deliver a poem on the European Union to you today, and at the end of an address that I admit was too long, which I shortened brutally, I have to confess that the European Union isn't in a great state, but we mustn't sit back and do nothing else than criticize the state of the Union, because in the course of the past year we have managed to carry out a number of important and substantial reforms, as I see it. I'm talking here about the Commission. We've got an agenda on migration adopted, and I wouldn't have it put to me and accept it that on migration the Commission has done nothing. Just this morning on the German television I heard a Bavarian minister criticizing the absence of the European Commission. Yes, I was on holiday. Weren't you on holiday at some point? You're quite right. But I was on holiday for 10 days. I worked 4 days on Greece and the others on migration, and the Commission came up with proposals in May. This is too readily forgotten. This isn't a problem that we discovered in May. It was others who realized with the terrible photos that we have this huge problem. We knew it. We have adopted a number of important additions to complete the single market, in particular on energy and on capital markets, and with my colleagues in the Commission that I would like to warmly thank for the excellent agreement that we had, I have to say it wasn't easy, but many have been prime ministers and know that bringing about agreement within an executive is something that has limits. And in the Commission, we have collegiality and friendship, and I think I am proud of the Commission that I have the honour to be a president of. I'm proud because in the first months of our mandate, we sent off to the two legislative arms of the Union major regulatory pieces of legislation which include the 10 priorities, on the basis of which and I'm proud of this, I was elected by this august assembly. Not everything is fine. It isn't the best of all possible worlds. The world would be better if we were better. And it is incumbent on us, therefore, to ensure that we keep this work up. I know the weaknesses of Europe, but I also know how weak this continent of Europe would be if the European Union didn't exist. So let us not stint in our works. Let us make further headway. Let us continue.